The radical Democrats are trying hard to restart COVID hysteria. I wonder why. Is there an election coming up by any chance? You know, I saw just the other day for the first time, we're thinking about masks again. I said, what's going on? Oh, that's right, there's an election coming up.
Former President Donald Trump accusing Democrats of trying to create hysteria about COVID-19. As recent numbers show an uptick in cases, Trump's comments comes right after the CDC recommends new booster shots for everyone 6 months and older. Joining us now is a professor of history at Columbia University, Simon Schama. He is the author of the new book out tomorrow entitled Foreign Bodies, Pandemics, Vaccines, and the Health of Nations. And want to hear about the book, especially in the context of COVID, starting there with kind of a big question, if I may. How is the world doing in terms of coping with COVID?
Well, Mika, it is doing pretty well because of all the experience and all the knowledge, and not least the extraordinary scientific ingenuity which managed to come up with vaccines in, a shorter time than anyone could possibly have imagined. So on that side, we're in relatively good shape, but ultimately it comes down to an issue of persuasion. I mean, underneath this whole enormous life and death subject is an extraordinary paradox about us now. On the one hand, humans are capable of astonishing scientific investigation with the practical effect of saving lives. On the other hand, humans are also barely evolved creatures, basketfuls of paranoia, suspicion, conspiracy theories, and cynicism, which manages to politicize public health. And it's quite easy, as we now know, particularly in the United States, to throw a spanner in the works. Viruses do not vote. Viruses don't care about voting. It's people who actually are prepared to actually try and gain political traction from delivering suspicions about vaccines who are a shocking problem. And this is clearly the case in the campaign being run by the governor of Florida and his hand-picked Surgeon General, Ladapo, who was someone who thought that hydroxychloroquine would be an effective prophylactic against COVID until it was debunked absolutely as being no effect at all. So we are our own worst enemy in this respect, can be our own worst enemy. A recent poll just showed an astonishing and distressing difference between the willingness of people identifying as Republicans and people identifying Democrats to accept this new booster shot. And it's not even really a booster shot, it's a new vaccine, because the variants of ultimately Omicron, variants of XBB, they've enormously mutated. They behave in different ways. Natural immunity and an old booster will not help. Hospitalization cases are rising even as we speak. I'm getting my shot this afternoon, so hope everybody else is too.
Yeah, I certainly plan to in the next week or so. Simon, so they're the politics of this. We just started to get detail into. We should, as a nation and as a world, we should be better prepared for the next pandemic, right? There's such advances in vaccines, the mRNAs, developments, and so on. But is it your concern, because of these political concerns, that when the next pandemic comes, and God forbid it's soon, we will actually be worse off than we were before?
Well, I don't want to be, historians' default mode is gloom, usually, is wise gloom. So I'm an exception. I'm sort of temperamentally a half-glass-full person, so I don't want to be that dark about it. But as I say, it does depend on credible persuasion. A lot of the people I talk about in my book in the 1800s and 1900s began demonstrating this startlingly sort of odd business of putting a little bit of poison in your own body in order to protect you from a potentially lethal case. They began it by vaccinating themselves and going on an extraordinary kind of promotional campaign. In one case, a scientist at the end of the 1890s, I talk about going thousands of miles to the poorest of poorest all around India in order to do that. So you need work. You need work with religious leaders. Often actually co-opting them makes a big difference, because people who think there's some battle going on between science and religion tend to say only God should be the judge of who will live and who will die.
Simon, on that point, one of the things we learned during the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic here, is that it is the more impoverished or those that are economically challenged communities that are given more to the conspiracy theories or putting the religious concept that, you know, God will handle this, and if God allowed it to happen, it's his will. What then should be the strategy that we've learned from history of those that have trust and that have some credibility with those segments of society that have been the most oppressed or the most neglected in terms of making them understand that they should deal with vaccinations or any other medical resolve to what may plague.
It depends on trusts, doesn't it? I mean, so much depends on trust, the health of nations. So it's crucial for scientists. It's not in their job description, really, to reach out to pastors and rabbis and imams and community leaders. But the difference really between, you're exactly right, Al, by saying, the difference between less well-off communities being disproportionately victimized by being unwilling or frightened or just thinking it's all too much of a problem, particularly with their children or young adults, and them actually being persuaded that vaccines are safe. Hundreds of millions of people have actually safely been vaccinated with the messenger RNA vaccines, which the governor of Florida is now saying are not safe. So it's crucially, has to exactly to say, it's a kind of mobilization of well-intentioned, knowledgeable people to persuade those who don't have the time to do epidemiological homework to actually safely look after their families and themselves.
The new book is entitled Foreign Bodies, Pandemics, Vaccines, and the Health of Nations. Columbia University professor Simon Schama, thank you very much for coming on the show, and congratulations on the book. Thank you for sharing it with us this morning. We appreciate it.